Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Run. I'm Macbeth of the Willies, your host. Today we have the honor again of speaking to Representative Jasmine Crockett from Texas, District House 100, who is now running for Texas 30, the one and only representative represented by Eddie Bernice Johnson, who endorsed her. Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I know you've had a hell of a day today. Thank you for being here and spending the time with us today. I have a few questions for you that we want to go forward. First of all, what got you into the national race after doing such a hell of a job in the state this year?
You know, I feel like I wake up every morning asking that same question.
I know.
No, you know, we fought so hard on the state level and all of our fights ended up on the federal level. And right now we are in litigation over so many things that happened on the state level, and we're in that litigation on the federal level. And honestly, our federally elected officials, they have the power to effectuate change, not only in this country, but definitely in the state of Texas. And so after working with a congresswoman on some things, she made it clear that she was ready to retire, but that's something she had been saying for at least a decade.
Yes.
And so, I was like, okay, like I was just listening. This wasn't me asking, this wasn't me trying to move her along. I was happy to defend and be on the defense. And I fought so hard to get my seat that I really didn't know that I wanted to fight again. I knew that it was going to be a packed race because the seat has only been occupied by her since it was created. And so for me, I was like, I love my district. My district is just kind of getting into the swing of things with me. And I just was like, I don't want to leave them. Now, obviously, if I live in her district and my district, then, there's a lot of overlap.
Right.
Not my complete district, but after you work to build these relationships, it's hard to think, let me start and build new ones and more. And so I just didn't know. And I got a call from a supporter of mine, and he said, what you need to recognize is you'll at least have an opportunity to be on the offense. In Texas, you're going to constantly be on defense. And so if you want to really get the types of bills passed that you really want passed, I can't tell you when you'll be on the offense, but at least things shift on a national level. They don't shift in Texas. And that really stuck with me. And I thought, this is my opportunity to do more than deflect, but to actually get progressive policies passed. And that was really a turning point for me in deciding to run.
Now, you just made a statement. You said to get progressive policies passed. Are you going to be running here in Texas and as an unabashed progressive, or maybe not those words, but simply letting people know what you want to offer them?
Right. So in fact, the interview I just did, I was explaining that my record speaks for itself. Like no one can come up against my record and act like there's any deficiencies in my record or act like my record is anything less than progressive. And there are people in this race that are running as theoretical progressives, right? Like right. It's all fun and games until you're really in the game. And we don't know how you will really govern. Well, I have governed in a very progressive way. Now, my district itself, we are not Travis County, right? Mm-hmm. So it ain't Austin.
Right.
So in certain words don't necessarily like work, but my policies work. Mm-hmm. So we will focus on my policies because my district loves my policies. But I don't know how they'll feel about certain words, right? So if I'll be going around and knocking on a door and saying, I'm a progressive, probably not. No. They actually love to hear that I'm a Democrat. That's right. What they want to hear. They want to hear that I'm a Democrat. And it's really kind of I would say an age thing, so to speak, right? Like mm-hmm. It's a generational thing. My district, the core voters are going to be older African-Americans. They don't know nothing about what a progressive is. Mm-hmm. But they know what a Democrat is. And that's what they want to hear. And so I tell them I'm a Democrat, which I am. And then I talk to them about the work that I think is important. And those things are actually progressive things, right? So I don't know that I'll be like, oh, progressive, which we have all these people in my race that are running and they're like progressive, progressive, progressive. And there's somebody that definitely is to the right. And so that person wants to kind of use that to kind of scare some people. So I'm going to run as Jasmine, who's a Democrat. And I'll talk to you about my policies.
No, I think you have the most name recognition right now based on, and not only that, but you have the real important endorsement. Now, how was your district redrawn with the new gerrymandered state of Texas? Did they pack more people in your district? What did in District 30, or what did they do?
Yeah, so District 30 was the most unchanged district in the state.
Okay.
And even though that was the case, they definitely used District 30 to do some illegal nonsense. So to the west of District 30 is District 6.
Mm-hmm.
That's a district that Trump only carried by 3 points. And my classmate, Jake Elsie, actually won that seat in a special election over the summer. And so that seat was so tight. In a real election, it may have been lost.
Right.
Special election is a little different, but in a regular election, it potentially was going to be lost. And so what they did is it was only 3 counties within it. You had Tarrant County, Ellis County, and Navarro County. And now there's somewhere between 7 and 9 counties.
So they really picked out the people.
Oh, man. And what they did is in the very diverse portion of Tarrant County, they decided to cut those people up. So they left a few people in there. They put some of the people over, and they took about 50,000 of the people and put them over into Eddie Bernice Johnson's seat. And then what they did is on the eastern side of the district, they took those minorities and brought Colin Allred, who had never gone south of 30.
Right.
He'd never gone south of 30. And they took Colin Allred's district and they drug him down, and they had him grab up those minorities on the eastern side of the district. So they used the district, right? Mm-hmm. The district was overpopulated by approximately 30,000 people. So all she really needed to do was shed. She didn't need to get new people. She just needed
to get rid of some of, and they knew where they were going to put those people.
Yeah, exactly. So,
mm-hmm.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead before we move on to policy and ask about how did you win her endorsement that quickly? Because it seems to me like what that's going to do is that's going to freeze out a whole lot of people, especially if you have talking about a whole lot of older people in there. She has a character in that district. So it's hard to believe that a lot of the people aren't going to follow her lead, if you will.
Oh, yeah. I think that it's the most powerful endorsement that one could have, mm-hmm. is to have someone that, has been elected or in some form of public service for the last 50 years. So, I mean, there are people that, they've been voting for her their entire lives.
Right.
And they trust her. And so it's absolutely going to be paramount. But I'll tell you that I earned her endorsement by doing the work. There have been people for years calling her, asking her, when are you going to retire? Will you endorse me? I can tell you that I never asked her to endorse me. Not once. We didn't really talk about me potentially. There were a few conversations where she said, oh, when you go to Congress one day, like she would say things, but I never said those things. These were things that she said, and people don't know how hard she works. And so while most people don't stream the House floor, don't stream committee meetings, she did. Mm-hmm. So here it is. She would stream and see what was going on in the Texas House. And so she watched me. Unbeknownst to me, you never know who's watching. You never know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that there were those people that thought that this was a superficial endorsement, right? That this was about the fact that I was the young thing that was on TV. And those are people that don't know her. Mm-hmm. She is 50 years in the game because she is politically savvy. And so the real story is that she watched me and she asked people about me, and we worked together in redistricting. And so she was able to better understand how I think, how hard I work. And that's what mattered most to her. She said she didn't want anybody that looked at this and didn't think that it was a job. They needed to understand that this was real work. And she even mentioned that when I ran for this seat, everyone was against me. And she said, and I saw that you work to get the people. And that's the only thing that matters is the people. And so she even brought up the fact that I was able to overcome all of the opposition and to win. And I won only because of the people, not because of money, not because of big names, but because I did the work.
Well, I mean, I think anybody who's watched you over the last year alone, you're a freshman in the state house. And I think being a leader as a freshman in the first house speaks a lot. You did a whole lot when you went out there to Washington to keep a lot of them folks together. And I think you went ahead, if I remember correctly, you led the pack. You went ahead of everybody else before they got to Washington, D.C., right?
I was ahead of everyone, but that was so I could break the news, but that's a whole other issue. But yeah.
I remember that. I remember that whole story. But anyhow, let's talk policy. What is Jasmine Crockett going to bring as Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett to the House? First of all, we need the youth. Two, we have some other stuff that we need to make sure of. So let me hear it.
Yeah. So, I think I'm gonna bring a lot of what I brought to the state house, right? I filed more marijuana bills than anybody else. No one would necessarily have to file those bills if we could get this passed on a federal level. So that's definitely going to be something that I'll be very active in, because when you look at the numbers of who's being incarcerated and you look at the numbers of who's becoming millionaires and billionaires, it's a problem. And so it's something that I'm very passionate about from a criminal justice reform stance, from a systemic, issue stance, from kind of inequity stance overall. I think that we need to clear up a lot of the missteps and a lot of the harm and hurt that's been caused in this country due to the over policing and over incarceration of minorities when it comes to marijuana. So I'll definitely be leading the way on marijuana policies. As a civil rights lawyer, this is where I really get to actually get into things like qualified immunity. On the state level, I was trying to minimize the number of contacts that people would have with law enforcement in general and make it to where people didn't necessarily go to jail for low-level nonviolent misdemeanors and even certain felonies, right? To minimize how many contacts we had, right? And so that was like a backdoor way of trying to get at some of the police reforms. And so this is an opportunity to kind of deal with them head on. This is an opportunity for us to actually start talking about how do we create this national database so that we fully understand who the bad guys are, right? Which bad cops are out there, instead of just letting them go from one agency to another. And so, those are things that have always been me. The things that I never thought that I would have to fight, the things that are probably leading issues for me at this moment have to do with voting rights, which is our very democracy, right? It's something I feel like I sound like a broken record on, because I've been screaming and yelling from the top of my lungs about it. And, I want to see what are the creative ways that we can maybe get something passed, because right now doing it head on with having the majorities hasn't worked, right? So I want to learn all of the rules and the nuances on the federal level and figure out if there's a way I can start sneaking things into certain things, right? Like, can I add something to a bill? Like, figuring out how to get over the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian caused the issue for people today, right? And so, those are things that you learn on the House level, or the state level, and just kind of figuring that out on the federal level so that we can start getting some kind of relief. Is there a way to tack this to any money, right? Like, I want to know these things. Like, if you don't do this, can I keep some of your money? Like, all those kinds of things. Obviously, you can't talk about voting rights without talking about redistricting. It's all kind of tied in. I want to expand the court because, frankly, we had a seat that was stolen, or two. And the way that this court is operating is less than optimal as far as everything that we know about.
Operating politically. Yeah, not as a court, politically.
Exactly. So, I want to expand the court. I want to make sure that we work on repo rights, right? So I was really excited to see that the FDA approved kind of this national ability to get an abortion pill without actually having to walk in and do an appointment. It'll be interesting because I want to read through all of it and compare it to the legislation that went through during the special session that nobody talks about because we've been so stuck on the first bill, but that was about limiting the number of weeks in which someone could actually receive abortion pills through the mail. So I think it can't be more than 7 weeks or something. So I want to read through kind of the two and see how they mesh up. It's obviously difficult to enforce the Texas law. So, you know, who knows what you're getting in the mail and why, right? And when. So, you know, that'll be kind of that part. So I think we'll be in decent shape. So I'm happy, but that was a workaround. That was a workaround for a country that has a government that's failing them. And so those are the things that I think I'll be tasked with is figuring out these workarounds to make sure that we are doing more protecting than harming.
Let me tell you one thing. You mentioned about being able to do things on the federal level. One of the reasons that we can't get things on the federal level is that we don't have enough people who are unabashedly aggressive in the policies they support and know exactly how to go against the opposition without fear. Yeah. And one of the things I think you're admired for throughout the country, and you know why the news media seem to be pulling you over all of the times, is because that is the fact that you're not scared to really confront the way many Democrats seem to be fearful in the way they confront the right. I hope that we get more Jasmine Crockett's running, because what we need in 2022 is a hell of a lot more. Joe Manchin said something that got to me, and he said the following. I want to hear your response about it. He said, and I know you went and you met with him as well, but he said, if progressives want their policies, elect more progressives. Interestingly, of those 50 senators, 48 senators want the Build Back Better bill and wants all the bills that, you know, the progressives so far in Congress are supporting. So he's saying near 50% is not enough. So we need a hell of a lot more of the Jasmine Crockett. So tell me what you think about that, and how are you going to, look, let me first say, you're going to win your seat. And by the way, the last person I told that to was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when I interviewed her at Netroots Nation. And she smiled with her innocent self when she was 4 years past. That was 4 years back. And she didn't only win, but she beat the guy who was supposed to be Speaker of the House, replacing Nancy Pelosi. So what I'm telling you, Jasmine, is you're going to be winning the House district. What do you think about bringing more progressives along with you?
Yeah, so I think we've got a shot. You know, it's crazy to say something like that in Texas, but I do. I think that we've got a shot. I think Greg Kassar is really making waves. And I think that he's doing a great job. I think that the district he's running in is the perfect district for his personality. And I think he will probably be the most outspoken. I really do. Mm-hmm. And then Jessica Cisneros, you know, she's running. Yes, she's running against, you know, Henry Cuellar. And it's interesting because that's a district that is down at the border, you know, and so it's the border districts, things get tricky down there. Mm-hmm. And so I'll be interested to see, because obviously the lines changed as well, right? And so there are definitely people that have never met Cuellar, mm-hmm. right? Like they're new people. And so it'll be interesting, but it gets tricky. So I've not been down to see kind of how Jessica runs like on the ground, right? Because that area is a lot more conservative, right? Like
it's a Latino cultural thing. And yesterday I interviewed Manuel Pastor from University of California, University of Southern California, who expressed how progressives need to reach Latinos, you know, the conservative Latinos that you're talking about, because they're socially conservative, but very much want all what progressives have to offer. So I hope I hope your friends really looking into that type of campaigning down there.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting because I don't know how she's going to deal with that. You know, it's it's been really an interesting time kind of talking to the progressive orgs as I'm going through this, because I'm basically like, chill out, guys. Like, you have my record. I think another article came out today that I'm trying to read. I got a Google alert from San Antonio Express that was like, it called, Greg a Democratic Socialist. And then it said, the headline was like, Democratic Socialist Greg Kassar, and like the most liberal member of the Texas House, right? Like, so it's an article that talks about the two of us, right? And so I'm like, it's anybody can tell you what you want to hear.
Right.
Which happens. Like, they say one thing and they do another. But at the end of the day, it is about how they govern. And so, so my big deal is the proof is in the pudding, but I know my district better than somebody from the outside.
Right.
I know what works in my district. And so, it'll be interesting. And I'm hoping that Jessica knows her district because, a lot of the issues that, we have kind of generally with like some of the votes have to do with, not supporting like repro rights, right? Like but down there, it probably plays well. I mean, we just lost a colleague in the House who was down south, and he became a Republican, and Trump immediately endorsed him. Right. And he was a Democrat, but he had voted with the Republicans on guns. He voted with the Republicans when it came to repro issues. Like, he was voting against us, you know what I mean? So, it's about knowing your districts, because at the end of the day, if you're going to represent your area, you got to represent your area.
Exactly. Right.
So I think that getting more progressives is possible. I just think it's about how we package this and how we sell it.
Magic.
I think magic. Yeah, because we're still Texas, and all it takes is Republicans kind of jumping on a bandwagon and making something seem like it's so scary and ridiculous, and then we're out of there, and we don't accomplish our goals. So I think we need to package things and allow like real progressives that have an actual track record to let them package themselves in the way that works for their district.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I like what you said about telling progressives at times they need to know when to chill. And that's some of what we work on. Well, anyway, Representative Crockett, please, last question that I always ask. What would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't?
I don't know. I guess ask me if I'm sane. No, I'm just kidding. It's a constant struggle. Just to kind of do what really I think every public servant should do, which is really just fight for the people, right? And this idea that we have people in office that ignore how they got there, ignore their responsibility to the people. And so I've become frustrated with the federal government. I think a good vast majority of like sane people in this country are frustrated. And I would just say that more real people need to consider kind of making the sacrifice and running for office. I think you should do your background and make sure you know what the office does, and make sure you study and get ready. But I think that's what we need. I think we need to move beyond kind of this cronyism that is crippling us.
Jasmine Crockett, State Representative, District 100, now running for candidate for Congressional District 30. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.